Wait for it, and you're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Richard Sparks, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hello, JR. Thank you very much for having me on your excellent podcast. I'm the author of the New Rock series. The first one, New Rock, New Roll, R-O-L-E. Second one, New Rock, New Realm. The third one comes out this year. There are 4 in the series, and I'm now on to sequels. It came out of my love of role-playing games. I just thought, what would it really be like to be this guy with a magic staff in a real world like this for real? Not in a game. That's been done. Going into a game. This is people actually coming out of winning the world championship, and the next thing he knows, the guy is standing on a hillside with crappy noob level gear, and he's being chased by wolves. And of course, he's useless. He may just have won the world championship online, but for real, he's never picked up a sword in his life. So things get worse before they get better. He's trundled off by a couple of scoundrel, I suppose you would call them elves in another world, but my elves are horrible little things, and sold off into the army, where he trains up and gets good and eventually finds his teammates, and the quest reveals itself over the course of the story. And there are now, as I said, 4 books in the series coming out. The last one will come out in 2026.
Nice. I actually have recently been reading a lot of the game lit RPG stuff myself. And I had so much fun with it. I'm writing one with a friend. We're like 40,000 words into the first novel as we speak. It's a lot of fun, especially when you get the chance to, you start gaming and you realize, this could actually be interesting, to put the story within the story. It gets kind of meta sometimes, but I dig it.
Completely. There's so much to unpack in that, what you've just said, because first, gaming has swept the world in the last 20 years. My exact contemporary and old friend from our university days, Douglas Adams, was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, was very much into computer games. Like I said, before he died. Well, Douglas died, I think, in 98. So by like 10 years before that, he was saying, God, these games are so good now. And I said, what? You're playing games like a kid? And he said, no, you got to try them out. And of course, he was way ahead of his time, as always. So I saw what he meant eventually and fell in love with particularly the sword and sorcery games, as well as I like the space games like Mass Effect, for example. And but I just like the magical world. And so I got this idea of what would it really be like to do that. And then I'm off the races. So I've come out of the other side of gaming, really. I'm now back to telling stories on paper with words. But the gaming business is 10 times the size of Hollywood in terms of revenue. And producers would love to get their hands on a piece of that action. The Minecraft movie, for example, has done gangbusters as it just opened. And we've sold the film rights to ours. So whether anything happens to that or not, I was actually on a phone call with the producer on Sunday.
Congratulations.
Well, thanks. I've been in that business for 40 years, so nothing's real until it actually happens. But
absolutely, I've heard the same thing.
Well, one no and it's over. You have to have people saying yes 20, 30, 100, 200 times. But the feedback on the call on Sunday was they're very, very keen to get into into that world and cross over that audience, and also to create their own worlds. One of the companies who are particularly keen on it are a major effects house, among other things. So if anything happens, I've written the script for a movie, but now they might want it as a TV show, so I'll just rewrite it. It's put back all the stuff I had to leave out in a 2-hour version. But it's crossover time.
When you talk about your distinguished career with the fireplace in the background, all you need is like leather patches on your shoulders or your elbows, and in a pipe, and you're definitely leaning into the British thing.
Oh yeah, well, wait a minute. I got my World Series of Poker T-shirt on, so I suppose that blows my cover.
You actually play poker, or you just?
Yeah, I played in the World Series a number of times. I played in the main event 3 times. I came in the top 10.5% once, and that was before the top 15% paid. So I would have made money if they hadn't just paid the top 10%. Got my queens cracked by sevens, and I was out on the rail after a week's hard work. But that led into one of my most successful investments, which is in Vegas. So it was a successful week altogether. I love the game, but since Black Friday and it's become illegal to play here in America, I don't play online anymore. Haven't for what's it, 10 years or more now.
It's definitely a complicated game. I've never gotten into card games. Although we played a lot of spades when I was in the Army.
Yeah, that's a good game.
Yeah, that and dominoes were the two big ones.
Oh, I love dominoes. Yeah, well, poker is a game that it's I've really freaked a friend of mine out who's a poker writer, and a rich friend of his put him into the main event of the World Series, and my friend was a very, very much a rock, very solid, very ABC. You could just, he was always like playing face up when you knew him, and I said, David, you've got to remember, poker isn't a game of cards; it's a game of situations. And he went away and thought about that all night. And the next morning, before sitting down, he said, "You've completely ruined my night's sleep." What do you mean a game of situations? So he's no better player than I was, and we're not good enough to live with the big boys who are just playing a different level of understanding to the rest of us. But that's the pleasure of tournament poker. You can have a good run in a tournament and do. I came, was it 20th in one tournament at the World Series of Poker a long time ago. So that was nice. So that cashed. It's just, well, look, it's like gaming. It's like playing a computer game. It's entertainment. It's informative. It uses your mind. And human beings learn through gaming when they're kids, don't they? Through what? Not gaming, I suppose, through playing.
Yeah, I grew up playing chess with my stepdad, and then when middle school, at least, I was in the chess club. There's the chess club in high school met at the same time the wrestling team practiced, so I couldn't do it in high school. But I mean, I do enjoy a good game. It's just sometimes the problem with board games like that, or it's hard finding people to game with you because there aren't as many people that want to do the chess or the checkers or any of the other.
I'm sure you could have found a Dungeons and Dragons club at high school. There's one everywhere.
I wasn't even aware enough of it to look in high school. I actually found that kind of gaming, tabletop gaming, as an adult.
I've never played it, but I remember going. My brother-in-law at college in England. He's an American. I remember he had a Dungeons and Dragons evening one night at the house, and I thought, what on earth is this? I just didn't get it. And then, of course, now going to all these science fiction and fantasy conventions and meeting the gamers, you go, this, I can see that this could really be a rabbit hole I'd love to have spent some time sliding into.
One of my goals at some point in the future is to get I think it's the Appendix L, the appendix that's attached to some of the original Dungeons and Dragons stuff, where it lists all of the books they used as idea inspiration, and just read my way through that list. That sounds like some hours well spent.
Yeah, and look, that lovely book Ready Player One had a Dungeons and Dragons club that where the hero met his other half in the team. So yeah, it's been around. But I got a question. You were a wrestler. Is that Greco-Roman style?
Yeah, the collegiate style is what we call it here, but it's Greco-Roman. Yeah.
Well, I was a judo guy in jiu-jitsu, and can you please tell me the sense of turning your back on someone when you're lying on the ground? I mean, wouldn't they just kick the shit out of you? I just don't get
if there weren't rules, but that's the one thing you learn when you wrestle is that the rules only exist when the rules exist. In a street fight, all's fair in love and war, right?
Well, I mean, I would never ever lie on my stomach, and I love fighting on my back. Once I started off as a judo player, as a judo university team, and then when my daughter was about 6, she got into the local Brazilian jiu-jitsu club. So I thought I'd join it. I thought this looks fun. And all these white belts were ripping my head off. What's going on? I've thrown you flat on your back. Yeah, but I'm still fighting. And you go, what? And there's this whole new world of the ground. But eventually you get to love fighting on your back, lying on your back and controlling the opposition. So I can't imagine that. I mean, I've seen American wrestlers. And my God, they're good. I mean, you can tell that they're incredibly skilled. In fact, one of our teachers used to do something called freestyle wrestling, folk style.
I've seen that.
Which is, it's basically beyond jiu-jitsu with no gi, plus all the moves of folk style wrestling. I mean, you can tell.
Wrestling in high school did lead to when I played college rugby.
It
was useful in taking people down.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well,
I had a walk-on spot at my college. Didn't make the cut because I'd hurt my knee at boot camp, and so no, if you can't shoot, you're not a wrestler anymore. Was what the coach told me.
oh, really?
On my way back from the wrestling tryouts, they were playing rugby in the field, and I thought it was a football that was just broken because we don't get exposed to rugby much.
Yeah.
I picked it up and I'm like, hey, do you want me to get this fixed for you? I'm sure they got more at the field house. But in rugby, if you have the ball, you're fair game. And so next thing you know, people are piling on top of me, and I'm like, I got to do this. So it was a very tense time when I called my mother, and I'm like, yeah, you know how I told you I didn't make the team because I hurt my knee? Well, could you send me rugby cleats? And my stepdad was like, you do what?
Yeah.
When I was in college, I actually took a sports history class to meet my last elective that I needed to graduate after I came back from my first deployment. And I actually learned that American football was created by Teddy Roosevelt as a way to make the English version of rugby safer.
Good Lord. Well, it's yeah. I mean, the rugby, trouble with rugby, I adore the game to watch, but wow. I mean, the first time I played it, I used to practice in my backyard with my little ball running around, and then age 6, the first rugby game, I mean, I was a scrum half, and large people twice my size leapt on me. What? You're not meant to do that. I'm meant to gracefully pass the ball out to the next person. Face down in mud with somebody sitting, and you go, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, I actually made the mistake of trying to pass when they were going to tackle me a few too many times. So that became the new rule: was Handley was never allowed to pass. Once I got it, I'm taking it till the end, or they put me on my backside because I was never allowed to pass after that. And then by the time I'm a senior, he's like, you can pass now, right? And I'm like, well, nope, you said no passing, so I just would take it.
Yeah, it takes a bit of learning, like any sport that does. Anyway, we sidetracked. Why
absolutely, but listeners like this kind of stuff. The good thing about contact sports is they do teach you a level of internal toughness, because you got to learn to just embrace that sometimes it hurts, but what's on the other side is great. I think that's a skill not as many people have as they used to. I mean, when you worked with your hands, right? Like everyone accepted, sometimes it sucks, but the paycheck at the end of the day was great. Yeah. Nowadays, like, we've gotten so soft, I think, that the idea of doing something that hurts on purpose, people can't understand.
Well, if you're into contact sports, actually it's in book 3 of the New Rock series. There's one chapter called A Game of Fnarg, which is my tribute to George R.R. Martin. And Fnarg is the game that is the national game of the ogres, and our heroes are not going to be allowed to get past the ogre town unless they agree to a game of Fnarg, which they've never played before, and they've a quarter of the size of the ogres, and how are they going to get through it? And so that's a bit of fun waiting for you in book 3.
I have to check it out, because you definitely in the pre-show made me intrigued. I'm going to check it out. I know that for the most part, every sport throughout human history evolved as a training ground for young warriors, except for golf. I can't figure out what the use that would be in combat, although I know it's an old sport.
Well, it's an old sport. It was started by Scottish shepherds. Nothing else to do except hit stones. It started stones around with sticks, and then one thing led to another.
If you get a chance, you should, dear listener, if you haven't, Robin Williams did a hilarious comedy bit about the origin of Scottish golf. Hilarious. If you
that man, what a joy he was. I met him, and I through Peter Cook, Peter Cook of, well, basically pre-Monty Python. He was seminal in English satirical comedy.
Yeah.
And he said, if you ever get a chance to see Robin, do give him my love. So I saw Robin. He was standing in the bar at the Improv here in LA, and I just by himself, and I went up and said, look, I'm a friend of Peter Cook's, and he says, you're the funniest thing since sliced bread, and are you going to perform tonight? And he said, I've just actually been on. He said, and he looked at me and said, well, look, just don't tell anyone, but I'm going to do it again tomorrow night. So I told everyone I knew, which was about 2 people. And my wife and I, with the other couple, went the next night, and it was one of those nights where there's, a really lame comedian. This was I was 1984. The year where people could get up on stage and just sort of give it a go. And so this poor girl was on stage dying. She was, one of these people saying, so anyone here from the Valley? And waiting for the audience to come back, and then, sort of staggering on. Felt so sorry for her. And then when she finished, Bud Friedman came on stage and said, ladies and gentlemen, I have a treat for you tonight, Robin Williams. And like the 30 people in the room just sat bolt upright. Whoa, because he was already a huge star. And he came on, he didn't use a microphone. And it was the Olympics was coming up in Los Angeles that month, probably. And he did an improv Olympic sketch that was just, I was almost dead with laughter at the end of it. He did things like improvising the Pakistani hubcap and baseball base stealing team. So running around the audience, speaking in a cod Pakistani accent, making this stuff up, stealing people out, throwing bases, running to the next base, going back. I mean, it was just breathtaking, just extraordinary, that level of comic genius. What a gift.
I had the closest I got to that was when we were in Iraq in 2004 for the Christmas special, the Sergeant Major's USO tour. We actually had Stuart Smalley, I think. I get confused which one's his public name where he was actually runs as a senator and which one was his stage name. I think Stuart Smalley was the stage name. But he came and performed, and that was right when they were doing all the stuff about not having enough body armor and not having enough up armor on the vehicle. So he comes out wearing like a 55-gallon trash can lid, like worn front and back, and one on his head. And he had a whole bit about, he's the smallest guy out there, and Schwarzenegger and who was the other one? Stallone were afraid to come, so that made him more manly than they are. And he didn't even have to take steroids. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
I never verified if they were even offered, but the bit, like, I was laughing so hard it was not even funny.
Oh, isn't it great when they do that to you? I was lucky enough to grow up with at Oxford and Cambridge. There was this sort of rival tradition. So we'd go to the Edinburgh Festival and do our shows, and people who came out of those Cambridge Footlights and the Oxford Theatre Group, all the Monty Pythons, Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, and later Rowan Atkinson, for whom I wrote. I wrote the sketch that kind of launched his career in a funny way. And then people like Stephen Fry, Emma Thompson, Sandy Toksvig, Hugh Laurie, just brilliantly funny people. And then because I wrote the things, they made me be on stage with them, which I enjoyed as a student, but was never tempted to. I knew I would have not had a career as a comedian. I didn't want one. I wanted to write. But it's a nice thing when you can have a room full of people laughing.
Absolutely, it's a good way to lighten a mood, so to speak, especially in tense situations. So I never judge.
Yeah, that's sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to run over you.
No, you were fine. I said I never judge people who use comedy as a coping mechanism because it's a perfect one. Dark humor is a thing for a reason. Well,
yeah. Look, and that circles back to the books, because one of the reviewers came up with this term for my book, fantasy, Funtasy.
I like that.
I know. I thought it was really nice of him. He said he was a bit worried because he'd seen my credits as a comedy writer, and he thought I might be doing a spoof or a piss take and mocking fantasy, which I love. I wouldn't dream of it, mocking it. But he realized that lots of funny things can happen along the way in a serious adventure. So things going wrong and people falling into puddles and disasters and misunderstandings, that's all comedy or comedy gold. So when funny things cropped up, I didn't say, oh, no, that doesn't belong here in a comedy. But actually, it's a kind of funny story about this, because my agent, when she was shopping the books around, she went to one of the publishers here in the States, and her pitch was always that all the fun comedy comes out of, all the fun comedic laughing stuff in fantasy comes out of England, with Terry Pratchett and Michael Moorcock, was he English? Douglas Adams, obviously, and various other English writers. And one of the people replied, and they said, we take our fantasy very seriously. so she called me back giggling and said, and I said, perhaps we better not send it there. But comedy and adventures are a natural fit. It's like Hitchcock would scare the shit out of you and then make you laugh, and then that would relax you, and then he'd make you jump again. If you just keep repeating the same effect, it's not going to have the same effect as it would if you let the pressure off.
I have written exactly one comedic story, and I will never do it again. I was approached by MD Cooper. They were doing a Space Pew Pews. I can't remember the exact name of the anthology, but I'd never written humor. I'm like, well, let me write the first 2,000 words. If you like it, if it's what you're looking for, I'll finish the story. And they got back with me like, JR, this is a little too crude barracks humor for what I'm looking for, but thanks, but no thanks. Really nice about it, like, and no judgment. But by that point in time, like, the story was stuck in my head, so I finished it. But every time you're writing a sentence, you want it to have like sometimes double, triple meanings layered into things. And it was the slowest I've ever written when it comes to actually sitting down to write something, because you're always overthinking it.
It's such a great
but it was fun. It just was so much extra work. Hats off to anyone that can do it, because for me it was just like pulling teeth to get it to where I wanted. I like the finished product, but
it's a lifetime's journey. And one of the things I learned early on is I wrote a play that was on in London that was, I mean, it's kind of a mess, but it was hysterical. The guy who did the lead, a brilliant actor called Gavin Richards, who's a TV star in England, he played 5 parts in it and 5 totally different characters. God bless him, because I learned so much from him. And one of the reviews in one of the London papers was really, it's one of those reviews you love. But one sentence started, entirely lightweight, comma, but often very funny, blah, blah, whatever it went on. And I read the review and thought, oh, but this writer, she doesn't understand that this is a searing indictment of man's inhumanity to man, as well as being some pompous, stuff like it. Took me a long time to realize lightweight is hard. Not everyone can do it. P.G. Wodehouse is lightweight. Dorothy Parker's lightweight. The Marx Brothers are lightweight. S.J. Perelman, a great writer. All the comedy writers who are working in TV and film. Lightweight is, if you've got the gift for lightweight, you should use it. And I mean, look, I'm going to drop 2 names: J.R.R. Tolkien and Philip Pullman. And I have one thing in common, apart from all writing fantasy, is that we all attended the same college at Oxford, Exeter College, which is 700 years old now. So Tolkien was before my time, obviously, and Philip Pullman was also before my time. But I read something Philip said, and it's really interesting. He said, I may not be able to make you laugh. No, I can't make you laugh, but I can make you turn the page. I think he's put it. And he does. He makes you turn the page. Really, really a good storyteller. But I can make you laugh. That's the point of difference between my style of writing and not some other forms of science fiction or fantasy writing. And that relief, that when you get a good laugh, and it's just a good thing. So as I've been doing it for 40 years in TV and film and opera and things like that, making people laugh is I continue to do it. But it's not a mockery. I don't take the mickey out of the genre, which I love.
So do you tend to prefer the comedy that's a little more ribald? Do you go with the more stiff upper lip that's known for the British comedy, which is a lot more...
You think the British are a filthy-minded lot. There's British and British. It depends on the situation. Some of it's fairly basic and earthy. Some of it's just funny situations. Not in the New Rock books. The comedy is pretty clean, I would say. I mean, there's it's not that near the knuckle, but it's just whatever happens is funny. When it's funny, go for it, and the rest of the time, it's a serious adventure.
I just noticed sometimes if you watch, like, we get BBC over here, you can see some of their comedies are just noticeably different style than what we would see here as a comedy.
Completely. Look, I started off writing comedy in England and got sent over to work for Columbia Pictures Television when they were, when they bought a show that I'd done in England. And so many shows don't translate and others do. A lot of English comedians, especially more of the kind of what you might call working class or blue collar comedians, came from England over to try and conquer America and never made it. But then Python hit. And Python was huge. And that was more among the student, university, more of a thinking man's comedy. And, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is probably the best loved geek film of all time. It struck a chord that... So sometimes it's a commonality between the two cultures, as well as the two languages. And sometimes we're on different wavelengths. And one of the things that I did in English TV was when I was working for Central Television, I wasn't involved in it, but they were also doing an English version of Who's the Boss. And all they did was change truck to lorry. They had exactly the same scripts. And Who's the Boss was on at the same time on the same channel. Not not different days. So that was Columbia Pictures Television, and they saw my show, bought it, and took me over to America. So yeah, there's a lot of interweaving, and sometimes we don't get each other's jokes, and sometimes we just love it.
And it's that old expression is that two countries separated by a common language.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
My actual first publisher was a small British press, and so when we first started signing the contracts, it was close to 4th of July. So he sent me the British Union Jack, and it's Happy National Treason Day, you colonial, and he used a keyword that's family friendly, so I won't use. And so when FedEx lost the contract, because this is back before DocuSign and all of the online stuff, and so I had to print it out, sign it, and then mail them an actual print copy of the contract. And they lost it. So when I reprinted it, re-signed it, and was sending it, they're like, "Don't worry about the wait this time. Just we'll get it. We apologize for the mistake, Mr. Handley." I put in there a card thanking him for signing me, and then I put in a Lipton's tea bag. I'm like, "Found this at the harbor stop. Thought you might." Because
the Boston Tea Party, all those people who are dressed up as Indians throwing tea into the harbor of the Americans, they were American, they were tea smugglers themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
I only learned this from Malcolm Gladwell recently.
I've done some interviews with authors that write alternative history, and I do wonder if they hadn't done the tax on tea the way they had, would the United States be a coffee country today, or would we still be drinking tea? I don't know.
Well, check Malcolm Gladwell's revisionist history for that particular thing. Another thing that kind of annoys Americans when you say this is, do you realize that if you hadn't seceded from the British Empire, which, by the way, I think was an extremely good move, but if you were still British, there would have been no American Civil War, because the southern states could not have survived against the British Navy. The Royal Navy was the biggest force in the world, and they would have completely just blocked off the south and starved them out. There would have been no supply from the south.
There would have been no cause for it, because if we were still part of the empire, the crown got rid of first trading in slaves. So then they slaves where they existed could stay, but you couldn't go and transport more. And then they transitioned from that to no slavery at all.
Yeah, in the 1810s, William Wilberforce was about that period, and he got that through the Parliament. But then for the next 50 years, there was an incredibly lucrative three-way trade across the Atlantic, in which ships from Bristol and Liverpool would go down to Africa, pick up the slaves that were usually sold by, a lot of them were Northern Africans, so basically Arabs in the slave trade, or just people would raid their neighbours and capture them. Then the British transport them across to the West Indies or the South, and then bring the cotton back to England for the mills and the Industrial Revolution that was going great guns. It was not, the Brits were trading on the slave trade and living off it until emancipation, really. So,
but if we would have been part, it would have been, I don't know. It'd be interesting to talk about, just because, what you official policy and what you do behind closed doors of any nation is rarely the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see what that looked like. And I haven't done enough study to know what the private diary papers and what the correspondence that weren't general knowledge at the time, what they were saying. But it's fascinating. Alternate history is like a whole new can of worms. But we're not here to talk about that. So I will ask you.
You want to get Harry Turtledove on and talk to him?
I was tracking him down today to see if I can reach out, because I think that'd be an interesting. I grew up reading Guns of the South. So
well, he's a Kasich author. He's published by the same author as I am, publishers as I am. So I'm sure Luann can get through to him and just ask her.
I will reach out. So, all right, before we dive into the series that brought us here, we do have the religion question. So are you ready for this?
Yes, sir.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Well, can I name drop?
Sure.
Definitely Star Trek. I was lucky in, I think it was October, to have dinner with Bill Shatner, as I was instructed to call him, at a friend's house, a lawyer who has done a lot of work for him. And that was really nice. And there were some other great people there, like the film director Gregory Nava, who did the film El Norte, which I really admired. And so, he's sharp as a tack, Shatner. His brain is on fire. It was great fun to meet him, and I was able to say how much I enjoyed Boston Legal,
Oh, I love that show. Freaking
Well,
hilarious.
and he said, yeah, Williams, what's his name? David Kelly's a genius. I was about to say David Kelly's about as good a TV script writer as I've ever read or seen. So that was a fun thing because I've been watching Star Trek since the 60s, really. When I'm a little younger than William. That was really nice. I don't know much about the later series, although I have played poker against Will Wheaton. Not particularly challenging, but a lovely chap. No, he's delightful. And my God, what a good reader of books he is. So yeah, I would go with which one did I say? Star Trek on that.
I don't know. I am not a fan of his narration. I think some of his nerd takes are pretty funny.
Did you listen to Ready Player One?
No, I did his originally. So I did my my first audiobook contract was with Podium, and to prove that they could to prove the case when they were, pitching the, hey, we'll sign your book to us. They sent me a copy of The Martian that R.C. Bray had done. And so I had that one on an actual CD. And so I listened to that. And then I know we're showing our age, actual physical media. And then when Will Wheaton redid it, I listened to it. And it just, when you compare the same story from like R.C. Bray to Will Wheaton, it just...
It's always the first one. You always remember your first one, young man. No, but I do listen to Ready Player One because he does a fantastic job on that. So anyway, so various Star Trek. Oh, Patrick Stewart, I saw live on stage at the Royal Shakespeare Company. An actor I really, really enjoyed. One of the funniest scenes I've ever seen was Patrick Stewart standing on stage with this old dog. And there's just the dog with it, a sort of Labrador, mixed black Labrador with a white beard. And he did his monologue, Lance and his dog Crab from Love's Labour's Lost. Is that the right one? Yes, I think it is. Two Gentlemen of Verona. Sorry. Anyway, one of them early comedies. And he would do his whole speech and look at the dog, and the dog would just wag its tail. It's just absolutely heartbreakingly brilliant, and we were all in stitches. And I've loved Patrick Stewart ever since. So yeah, I would definitely go Star Trek. Although I did enjoy much of the Star Wars universe.
I liked what I've seen of Star Trek. It was just a little too utopian for my taste. Just like the whole idea of post-currency society just kind of goes against every as a historian. Like, yeah, I mean. We've been doing money things since we were using seashells as currency,
Yeah.
And so it was a little too utopian. Some of the other series got away from that. That was the kind of impetus to the first one. But aside from that, and finding Q very annoying, I did not like it. I like Star Wars because it was the space magic, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Alec Guinness, of course, one of those extraordinary things that happen in life where he thought he was getting into something that was complete rubbish, but turned out to be his pension, and he did a wonderful. It was just magic. I remember when that came out, going and seeing it. Wow, that was two good hours in the cinema.
I enjoyed the movies more than the series just because the plot was tighter.
Yeah,
and if you didn't have the ability to watch one after the other, sometimes you miss things with the context. But if you watch the movies one after another told the story in bites that kind of worked. So I really did enjoy the movies. Wrath of Khan, particularly.
Well, Wrath of Khan? That's what, Star Trek?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you moved on to Star Wars.
No, I was saying that Star Trek, for me, the problem was it was utopian, but they did fix some of that in later versions of it. In the original series, it was very like, we're post-money kind of vibe, and they just... It was
I haven't seen much of the later series, if anything, really. But yeah, they did make some very good blockbuster films in that universe. And Star Wars, on the other hand, when it went over to TV, I found that every episode was just, they had to have all this battles and stuff, and they'd lost the wit, the sort of heart of the Star Wars, the early movies. Yeah. There was a joy. There was some, you were smiling and chuckling. And I love that, but The Mandalorian and things like that are just plod with nice special effects and a good monster, but not a whole lot of heart.
Yeah, I am not as much of a fan of the post-Disney Star Trek or Star Wars. I did like Clone Warriors. I did like the New Republic stuff. But as a general rule, like you're right, it was too much green screen special effects and not enough whatever it was that made the original ones pop.
Well, when you got the banter between Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher or whoever, that's it. It was snappy. It was the whole heart of Saturday morning episodic trash cinema.
Absolutely.
I just got it right. Same with Indiana Jones. Unfortunately, Spielberg butchered Ready Player One as a film. That was horrendous, and probably because they couldn't get all the rights to this, that, and the other. But there was so much great material in the book Ready Player One, none of which they used, and then they put this on. It's just like basic bad writing, and I thought it was all, even with Mark Rylance in it, who's an actor who's just one of the best ever. No, that really, I came out of the cinema fuming at that because I loved the book so much.
I have to check it out. I've got it on my TBR pile. I will move it closer to the top.
Okay.
And so, because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia.
Well, take out The Wheel of Time because it wasn't finished, and you can't do that to your audience. I had one of my test readers is a producer in Hollywood, an Emmy-winning producer, and I took him out to lunch after I'd finished the fourth book and said, I think the series is over, and I'm going to have to go on to sequels. And he said, and I was so worried because he said, I love it when a series ends. And you go back and you think, actually, yes, there's a lot in there. Look at the Game of Thrones, the TV show. I mean, the last season was a mess. It was badly thought out. The ending came out of nowhere. All writing, as you know, all plot writing is set up and payoff. If you want something to pay off, like with Daenerys going mad and turning into a nitwit, well, then for God's sake, set it up over the 12 years you've had to set it up. Don't just drop it on us out of nowhere and say, oh, well, her father was the Mad King, so therefore she's mad. I mean, it was such sloppy writing. I was cross with that. And I absolutely adore the books. I think George R.R. Martin is a master. Well, obviously he is. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing when the sixth book comes out.
Do you think he's actually going to get to finishing it? Or is he going to wait for Sanderson to finish it his too? Robert Jordan gets a pass because he died before he could finish it. But
again, that's why I wouldn't have. I love the Chronicles of Narnia, except book 7 is not very good. The last battle, but that's because the tail was wagging the dog. By that point, he was so into his religion, Christianity, that he just kept shoehorning Christianity into it. And Aslan was revealed to be the son of God, and the emperor oversees. It's just lumpy. If you want to get people to buy your message, you've got to be more subtle than that, because it's really off-putting. But I absolutely loved those books when I was a kid, and I think they're great. But the what's it called? Not Song of Ice and Fire. Isn't that what the series is called? The Game of Thrones series.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just an extraordinary achievement when you think that each one of his books are the size of 3 normal books. He is my step writing partner. He doesn't know it. Actually, he does, because my editor's a great friend of his. So news swaps backwards and forwards. He wrote Beauty and the Beast, which actually turns out to be my editor's favorite comfort reading TV show, which she goes back to when she needs a break. And that was composed by Lee Holdridge, which means every moment of every frame has music under it. And Lee's a really wonderful composer, and I've done, I think, about 10 operas that he's written the music to. I've been the librettist. Some of them are short ones, and some are full length. So Lee is my writing partner in operas, and we've done some songs for movies and things like that together. And he's also, in a way, George's writing partner because of scoring Game of Thrones. And when I learned that Lee had done Beauty and the Beast, I said, what was it like working on that show? And he said, well, the great thing was every week you get this amazing script from Ron Koslow or George Martin. He said the writers are so good. And then they just left him to get on with it. So in a way, that's my connection to George Martin. But I'm a big fan of those books. I admire, and for an American to write what is ostensibly British English, I mean, it's almost flawless. I think in what, how many pages has he done now? About 89,000 million pages. I
Yeah,
think
dude,
I've only spotted
writes a lot.
I've only spotted a couple of things that say, no, it's not quite the English voice, but what great stories. Good for him, and he's reinvented the wheel in a lot of ways, with the different points of view of the paragraphs and the chapters, and the chunks. And every time you come back to somebody else's chunk, you fall back in love with them again and realize you're supporting them. So you're on everybody except Ramsay Bolton, he's rather easy to dislike. The Boltons, you don't really get on their side of the story, but everyone else gets a fair crack at the whip. That is an amazing achievement.
Absolutely. All right. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important questions. So we are bringing that back because our patron asked us to. So what is your favorite dinosaur?
Struthiomimus. Just because I like the name. I think he was a very small, sort of scuttly little rat-like thing, quite late. But I also, when I was a kid, I had a mug with a Dimetrodon on it, with that lovely big sail. He looks a bit like a large Komodo dragon with a big sail along his back with spines. And I think there was some kind of ventilation organ, apparently. But I loved my Dimetrodon mug. And I also like Struthiomimus just because of the name.
Okay, that's a good reason as any. All right, and finally, because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Well, you may have spotted this during the course of our talk, but I do not need anything that makes me leap up and down and babble. I need something to calm me down. I'm happy to talk and chat, but coffee tends to goad me up rather too much. So I very rarely drink it. I like it, but tea, I drink several cups a day. Apparently, it's got more caffeine than coffee has.
Some of them do. I think like herbal teas generally are caffeine free.
No, I drink proper traditional British, what we call builder's tea in England. So it's thick and black with milk and honey. I don't put sugar in it. I put honey in mine, and live on the stuff.
Now, do you do your tea loose leaf or like in the pressed bags, or loose leaf in the bags? Now that's
I'm onto the bags now. The Americans have won. What PG Woodhouse calls they have their tea in little packets. No, bags are really convenient, they're freely available now at a good supermarket near you here in Los Angeles. So I got no complaints. In the old days, I had to bring it over from England.
So one of the things, when I got hurt overseas, they gave us a lot of cortisone, which was a shot because I hurt my knees, to keep the swelling down so we could stay in the field. And so they basically gave me, over the course of my 2 years in country, more than you're supposed to get in 2 lifetimes. And so one of the things my doctor, when I got home, was like, hey, JR, like maybe you want to try some over-the-counter medicines before, like natural herbal remedies before you go to pills, just to, protect your liver as much as you can.
Wow.
And so I found some of the nutritional benefits that you get from various teas. I mean, because if you think about it, before the pharmaceutical companies existed, we still had medicine. We just made it out of nature. So it's essentially going back to that a little bit. And I found that the teas actually can be pretty beneficial. So I'll do like local honey and peppermint tea. Mm-hmm. It's perfect when I get a cold. Like you can't beat that as far as a cure goes. That and a little bit of sweating, and you're right as rain.
I completely agree. When I was doing martial arts, just for fun as an amateur to keep healthy, I used to get sort of stiff and bruised a bit. So I would go to a Japanese, not a chiropractor. He hated them. He said they did damage, but a shiatsu guy. And he said, you should never have more than one cortisone shot in your lifetime. He was really against it. And I said, wow, because I'd had a few. He said, cortisone bad. I mean, I don't know if he knew what he was talking about, but I think if you can go more natural with your medicines, that's got to be worth considering.
Absolutely. I'm not against medicine. Like I said, I just, they were overdosing us with it just to keep us in the field in the early war. They needed bodies. But you don't really think about it until I actually had a doctor sit down with me, and he was like, we had medicine before the, Pfizer and all the other companies existed. The stuff still works, but you can't get it in the press bags. You got to get it loose, because the pressing process, like Lipton's does, it gets rid of a lot of nutritional benefit. And then you started getting loose leaf tea, but just with a mesh bag. And you get the best of both worlds. And so that's what I do now.
Yeah, completely. The natural medicine there's tons of it all over the world, and different cultures have discovered it. I mean, for example, look at this thing with the what's his name, RFK Jr.
RFK Jr. Yeah,
our health secretary. Can you believe it? And he's going around saying that vaccines are bad for you. Well, it was West Africans who introduced the West, America, to the concept of inoculating against smallpox, because that's what they did. They would take something out of a cowpox and inject it into the human being, or scrape it into the skin of the human being, who would then grow immunity. And this slave who told the doctor about it, he said, well, they won't take this from me because I'm a slave. And but when the white doctor started doing it, people realized, hello, this works. So inoculation and medicine from the natural world it's been around for a long time. There's a lot of wisdom out there in different cultures.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this is the moment, dear listener, because we've been plattering on for a little bit. We're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and then we're going to jump right into talking about the books that brought us here.
Mythic heroes throughout history tamed creatures of lore to fight alongside them. Video games took up the mantle, and for decades, players adopted beasts for companions. Some had tigers, others lions, dinosaurs, some even had dragons. So when my consciousness was transferred into the most realistic virtual game ever created, I chomped at the bit, hoping to befriend a great beast to fight at my side. And what did I get? A porcupunk. Who needs a dragon anyway? Read a book.
His commercial always makes me think of the Reading Rainbow with, was it Burton something? Is he the one who did it?
That sounds like something.
He's one of the Star Trek actors who did the Reading Rainbow. But the read a book thing.
Oh, Lamar Burton.
Yeah, Lamar Burton.
LeVar, sorry.
Yeah, every time I hear that commercial, it's like, oh, take a look. It's in a book. It's Reading Rainbow.
Well, our guys, we got the three in the crew, the three people from Earth who win the world champion of sword and sorcery. They discover that they're now in a new world, and they're their own avatars for real. One of whom is an Australian whose avatar is an orc, so he's not sure he really made the best choice. And the other's an Australian American, but he's a great guy. And as an Asian American girl sword dancer who's real kick-ass. She's the DPS, damage per second. And Dax, in the narrator, he's actually a retired school teacher who's now young again, and he's in this world where he doesn't even know if there is magic. And one of the people they pick up along the way, who becomes the fourth leg on the team, is Ola, a thief. And along the way in the first book, he's adopted by a stray mongrel. So that's our spirit animal. And this dog, little guy, and Ola are absolutely devoted to each other, save everyone's neck again and again and again. Little guy turns out to be a really heroic and useful, and there's nothing he wouldn't do for Ola, who's rescued him. And so we do have a heroic animal on our side who's a mutt.
As it should be. All right, so thank you, dear listener, for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. With that out of the way, before we start talking about the New Rock series in detail, for those listening at home, because we do have some families that listen, what would you rate the book? If we'll use the movie theater scale, because I think everyone can kind of relate to PG, all that. How would you rate this novel, this series?
Well, there's some rude words in it, but there's no rude sensibility. There's action, but there's not atrocity porn. So, if you don't mind, and friends of mine in England read that their 12-year-old son read it and adored it. And then another people's kids have liked it. And they kind of like it when the occasional rude word turns up. But when I say atrocity porn, I mean, there's a book I read recently which started off really well, a fantasy book, and there was the school and the training sequence and the heroine learning to go all through. And then when it got off to so that they go off to war, it was atrocity porn. It was just horribly overdone, nasty pictures painted in your head of things that people were doing. I just stopped reading. Not interested. I want to give my audience a good time. And action is a good time. And yes, there are things that are unpleasant, but you don't wallow in it. And so the same level of, I suppose, slightly blue or cheeky or whatever it is. I mean, the way people talk. I mean, people do F and blind and say things. If you've got a couple of orcs squaring off against each other, they're not going to be saying, "I say, old boy, would you mind frightfully?" They go, "So what are you fucking doing, you moron?"
No,
if I'm allowed to say that.
No, you're fine. So you don't generally like grimdark, but you actually like Game of Thrones. That's an interesting.
Yeah, grimdark's too grim for me. Game of Thrones is fine. When they did this TV series and they had who's that prince? Tyrion's brother, the Irish actor, can't remember his name, the one who became king of Joffrey, and when he shot two, I suppose prostitutes or whatever they should be called, with crossbows tied, I just thought that was unnecessary, and that was trying to jolt us with the thrill of something being naughty, but it was actually it was unpleasant. It didn't need it, didn't advance the story at all. It was just one of these attempt to.
So there's definitely a balancing act when you're talking about combat, because the danger is if you make it too sanitized, you don't impress on people that, hey, this isn't cool. Like sometimes war is necessary, but if you glorify it and you sanitize it too much, people might be too willing to go there, right? Like when there are other alternatives.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a happy medium somewhere where you impress upon people that without what you call, the atrocity porn or gun porn or whatever, because there's definitely room to show like it's horrific, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't be more right. If you get to a battle scene where your guys are exhausted and at the end of the tether and they're outnumbered and stuff, it's going to be grim, and you've got to address it, and you've got to get through it to the other side and show the exhaust, these emotions that matter. It's not the shocking events. It's how they are just up against it and what they're going to do and the thought processes and how they're going to get out of it. And that's more important and more interesting than just showing corpses being hacked around.
Like you want to show the battle, but you don't need to make every battle like Cannae, the one where Hannibal crushed the several Roman legions, 2 Roman legions, I think, where they literally encircled them and slaughtered them. I made the mistake when I was in middle school of doing the math of the number of soldiers the Hannibal had versus how many the Romans had, and you do the math of how many every soldier had to kill. And it's like, oh my goodness, that was enough. Just the math alone was kind of eye-opening. So
I mean, look, we are a bloodthirsty species, and combat and war, and what was it? Plato said, "Only the dead have seen the end of war." There will always be conflict. Unfortunately, that's the human condition. But I think it's as unwise to exploit it in terms of. Actually, we can make a joke here. I was going to say glorify war, and then I thought glorify it either way.
Yeah.
The absurdity of glorifying war and going off with the trumpets blowing and the colours flying and the girls all blowing kisses. They're going off to, an unpleasant event. So while there is heroism, undoubtedly, and that's one of the things we love in our stories, I don't think it is a middle line. It's got to be authentic. It's got to pack a punch, but there's no need to wallow in it because that's the law of diminishing returns.
Yeah, and that's where you mentioned earlier, where if you do it too much, it loses that. Like if every scene is a jump scare, nobody jumps anymore.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right. So yours is probably closer to PG-13 then, based on some action and some. Would you wouldn't?
Yeah, but anything. Yes, but no, but yes, I think so because, well, look, like saying sometimes it's serious and sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's brutal and sometimes it's kind. any story, any life. So there are. I think the tone is generally fairly benign and optimistic, but that doesn't mean to say they're not going through a whole lot of shit.
Okay. So what age would you let, would you say it's appropriate at least 12 and up then, if you've got 12?
Yeah, well, I've had some 12-year-old readers who loved it and have written to me, or their parents have, and listened to it in the car with them. And yes, they've been. My oldest test reader is in her 80s, and Milo in England is now my youngest test reader. He just turned 13, and he's been bugging me to get book 3. He says, "When can I see the next one?"
That's always a good sign, is when they want
it
more.
It is. It's really nice. And my editor is going through it at the moment on the developmental edit. So
I really like these covers.
Aren't they great?
Honest,
you know, this is such a weird thing. This woman, Christina Mervold, she's Norwegian, the artist. I think she's absolutely brilliant. And the one people I've been getting pushback from, this was astonishing. She's one of my dearest and oldest friends, who is herself a great artist. She's won many prizes, been nominated for some seriously big ones. And she and the English designers that she knows, including her son, don't like the covers. They say, this is. I can't understand it. I've known her for 40 years, and I say, what sense? She says, well, this and that, and her other editor, and I say, well, show me an example of a good cover, and then it seems boring, which is, and 10% of our life, she and me, and she's married to one of my best friends, is talking about art or books or anything. She's a really close chum. So it's so funny that, and she loved the book, and she's saying to her son, the son said, I can't read it with that cover. And she said, look, but the book's really great. I understand I understand your reservations. And when I hear this, I go, but that cover's lovely. It just says,
I dig. I don't often like trad pub covers. I love these covers.
I know, it just that say, come on in and have fun, and oh my God, what's going on? And then show the other book. I mean, if I, that's, and look at this, the imp on the back of the chair with his red eyes. If you can scroll in, the man with the bubble head and the red-eyed imp on the back of the chair, and behind them this large dragon who turned this sinister creature.
And then the scrolls even have the detail on the wraparound ribbon.
And we're in a ruined library in a temple, and our guys are trapped and they're in trouble. And I showed it to my friend. She goes, oh, yeah, well, bums in bubbles. And I go, what? What's wrong with you?
They clearly have no taste. I loved the cover. When I saw those, I'm like, I definitely want to read this book now.
Well, she's a brilliant designer. So it's so funny. And she says, I know, it's just different. And I said this to our publisher. I said, I've just got this note from, and he said, you can't please everyone. But I love Christina's artwork. I love these. I'm just thrilled. And look, when you finish this interview, I'll send you it doesn't have the lettering on it, but the design that she's done for the third book, New Rock, New Rules.
Okay.
Which is just, I mean, she's so good. I mean, I can see someone saying, oh, well, whatever. It looks like a still from a film or something off a comic book or whatever. But I can't understand people who are artists themselves saying this is wrong, this isn't good, because she's really good. Anyway, I love it.
Sometimes people don't understand the purpose of a cover is to make you want to know more and then want to read the book.
Honestly, no. She's an American, but she lives in England. She does a lot of work in the book world. She is an incredible.
No, I'm not talking about her. I'm saying
she does. And her and the people she's talked to in England, it seems to be an English sensibility among book publishing, book cover people who resist it. But yes, you can't please all the people all the time, but I'm glad you like it.
I absolutely love it. I think, this reminds me of some of the covers I loved in like the 80s fantasy, like some of the Tad Williams covers, the Green Rider. I mean, the coloring is different because yours is darker and more vibrant. I don't know what the original Tad Williams art looks like, because I do realize when you matte something and you gloss it over, you lose color changes. But I am colorblind, but I mean, this one pops a lot, and I think some of that's because we're looking at it digitally. But this reminds me of all the covers I loved from the 80s and 90s.
That's great. Yeah,
like the 2000s on, some of the covers got so artsy fartsy that they forgot that they were actually supposed to make me want to read the book.
And a lot of covers I get, I subscribe to various things, like there's a Swords and Spaceships file or something, and there's Book Riot. And so many of the covers are just the same. There seems to be a dreariness about them, and some of the, like in their romance sections, that you just, I mean, I was stunned when Christina came up with the art for the first one, and then the second one. I just thought, my God, I've got lucky with this artist. And she's huge now. She's doing work for the Marvel universe, but she still works for our publisher at a reduced fee, because he was one of the first people to give her work, and she loves us. So I'm very lucky.
One of my favorite cover, when you find a good cover artist, you grip them with both hands, because
yes, you do.
But mine unfortunately went and got his wife pregnant, and he had to get a real job with actual benefits, and so he doesn't do book covers anymore. But yeah, this is amazing. I really dig it. All right, so the concept that is the new rock, which I'm assuming refers to the new world they go to.
Yeah, because like Third Rock from the Sun.
Right, that's what I got from it too. But what was the origin, like, for the concept that eventually became this universe?
Well, the origin, it fell out of the sky and hit me on the head like a ton of bricks. I was galloping around playing Elder Scrolls Online in a raid with 24 people in a raid on that game. And it was Friday night. I think it was Drunk Friday. So we all had a beer or two inside us, and we were charging off to do mischief. And I just thought, what would it really be like? That's fabulous. I want to be in a world like that, with a magic staff and what would it really be like to really be that guy? And there was only one way to find out, which was to write it. Now, it's not set in the game, because that's been done, and sometimes better than others. This is people who happen to be good at gaming, who suddenly find themselves having to do it for real, in a real world that they've never seen before. And it gets worse before it gets better. So obviously you've got the whole, training sequences, and there's a wonderful character. He gets sold into the army, don't ask, but my lord's army buys him from the slave auction, and the next thing he knows, he's shivering in the courtyard at dawn, and this fearsome sergeant at arms, Jack Blunt, who's known by one and all as Sergeant Bastard, comes down to train them. And he's a master of every weapon, and he becomes a very important character in the course of the series. Bit of a quest giver in many ways, but he's the master of every weapon that's ever been invented for a particular reason. He made himself good at everything. But so they train into
the Skyrim universe.
Oh, similar to all those Elder Scroll games. Those games are so beautiful, and so I wouldn't have been able to have this idea without all the work that the devs and the designers of those games have put in. I owe them so much for the inspiration. And so it just took off.
For the cultures here, did you, like, the Skyrim was obviously the Viking-esque meets the Romans. A lot of these fantasy worlds tie into stylized versions of actual Earth cultures. Did you do that when you were creating the peoples that inhabit this new planet?
Yeah, very much. So it's the same but different. It is a sword and sorcery world. Unlike George Martin's worlds, Westeros and the others, there is very little magic there. It's the Red Wedding, the woman who's killed in that comes back to life, doesn't she? And there's a bit of spookery in it, but there's actual magic, but it only reveals itself like 200 or 300 pages in, because our guy's saying, well, look, I was a mage in the game, but here I'm a crappy noob in an army and I'm useless. So it takes time to reveal itself.
Well, that actually tracks if you've ever played a wizard mage character. They are really weak in the beginning. They get really powerful later on if they live. That's
why I did it. And you don't want to hand everything on a plate. So, for example, he and the Australian orc Grell and the Asian American sword dancer girl Greaster, they land in separate places. Now, he and Grell hook up pretty quickly because they have to go through the training sequence. They don't know where Greaster is. They need her. She's an important part of the team. So she's off with her own problems to solve before they all meet up again, and the gang's all there, and they can go off and address the main quest. But that really only, they all join up together halfway through the book when other things have revealed. Because, it's I wanted a big world, like the Elder Scrolls Online, they're sandbox games where you can go anywhere. Yeah. But of course, in a game that's already been written and the sides of the game are organized, you can't go beyond them. But in a book, you can go anywhere.
So with this one, is it first person or third person?
Aha, great question. And the answer is both. In the first book, it's entirely first person.
Okay.
And there was one chapter where, when Krista's adventures are happening, I told that third person, but my editor said, look, you're 300 pages through the book now. You can't suddenly go back into third person. You'll throw people. So I had to do it in a way that was then put in first person as narrated by the narrator to whom she's told it. So that was one edit I need to put it. But in the second book, one of the things I learned from a TV series I wrote a long time ago in England called The Famous Five is you don't want everybody in the same room all at once. This was a kid's adventure series. So we have a team of 5 people at one point. I think there are 5 or there are 4 of them in the second book. They need to go off in separate directions and solve their side quests before they can join up again on the main one. So that book is partly first person by the same narrator, the battle mage, who's our hero. But then when the other people go off on their bits, it becomes third person. And so that's okay. I mean, the audience gets it. They see who they can switch between first and third easily enough. And this is how you create a film script, by the way. You have A story and B story and C story, and you cut them together. That elides time, and the plots interweave to create the main story.
So the first book is all the main character's point of view. Do you ever plan on telling maybe a short story or a side novel with some of the characters' life before they link back up?
Oh God, you hit the nail so hard on the thumb there. It's brilliant. Last night, since finishing the 4th book and going on to plan things afterwards, I've tried various things, but I think what I'm going to do is write a book of short stories of basically the two scoundrels, the ones who captured him and sent him off, sold him into slavery, basically, but into the army. They get up to all sorts of scrapes. They're called woodskins, so they're about half our size, deadly archers, can disappear in the forests, but basically a couple of broke scoundrels. And they get up to a lot of adventures. So what I'm writing at the moment, and what I was writing last night, is one of those stories in which they turn up again with yet another problem, and our hero's got to see what he can do to help them fix it. But I hope to make them shorter than these 400 to 500 page books. I want to make each story maybe a chapter or 2 in length, so 15 to 30 pages. Depends how they turn out, because I like a lot of the great short story writers don't really do a lot, silly generalization, but they don't do a lot of dialogue. And I do like writing dialogue. It just depends. Some stories demand more length than others. Anyway, I enjoyed writing last night's little bit, made me laugh.
So these are probably if they're 500 pages or probably 150,000 words ish?
Yeah, they are exactly 150, 160, okay. Which is unfashionable these days. My publisher, Kasich, which is a very good independent science fiction and fantasy, also romance publisher, he's now not accepting manuscripts from unknown writers that are longer than, I think, 120,000 words, because I think it's to do with technology, but a lot of people's concentration spans have shortened.
Well, the other part of it,
go on.
Raw math. You can sell one book at 200,000 for $4, or you could sell 2 books at the same 200,000 total word length for 10 books, because now you're selling it as 2 books,
and you can get more books on the shelf if they're thinner. Yeah, yes. There's all that. But look at George Martin's wonderful books. Those, we wouldn't want them any shorter. They're fantastic. I'm prepared to go out and buy one at whatever length. And once you get the hang of it, people who are writing to me now through my website, richardsparks.com, if you're interested.
And they'll all be linked in the show notes.
Okay, thanks. Well, they just say, can't wait for the next one. And they love the fact that it's a story that they can't wait to see how it turns out, but they never want it to end. That's one I've got. I was really enjoying this, but oh no, it's getting near the end. I don't want it to stop. And then they discover there's a sequel, so they go, oh phew, there's more to come. That's what I love in a book myself. So to have tried to do that has been, it's been great.
So what can you tell us personality wise about the main characters, your initial main character and then your ensemble cast?
Well, the initial main character is basically me, and a mixture of me and my father. He was a school teacher. So this is a retired school teacher widower who discovers that he's really good at gaming online, and his two best friends, one's American, one's an Australian. He's never met them in real life. They never say what they are in real life. All he knows is their avatars. So the three of them happen to be a very good team and happen to win. And actually, the week that I finished the first book, there was the first Fortnite championship, or a Fortnite championship.
Nice.
With like 30 million people watching on live stream. And I go, but I've just written that. I mean, not Fortnite, but people watching a game live stream. And our guys win it. And the next thing they know, they're off and away.
Okay. What can you tell us about the big bad in this novel? Obviously, no spoilers because we want people to read the books. But what can you tell us about the protagonists?
Well, Dax the hero, the one who's a battle mage, instead of being a retired school teacher, he's now young and heroic and fit again, and of course he loves that. Kreesa is a kick-ass girl with twin blades who's as deadly as she is fast, and Grell the orc, he's basically a tank in the game terms. You wouldn't want to mess with him. He's useless at first. He's a complete wimp, but when he trains up, he becomes masterful. And then various other people appear. There's the thief with his dog, and also other people. Marnie, this witch who lives in the forest, an old grumpy old lady I can't stop writing her. She keeps appearing all the time in the story. Now the villains, of course, the rule always is the villains have got to be more powerful, scarier, more threatening, more imminent than the heroes. The heroes have got to be always out of their depth, always faced by challenges that seem insurmountable. And this one is, in the first book, he's a brute. And that happens in all the books. In fact, in the third book, there are two of them. And one of them is, the most cultured, entitled piece of... Oh, you hate him. He's so full of himself. He's a prince from overseas who has, an army of dragons, and they don't have any. So it's completely outmatched by him. But how are they going to solve that problem? And they all have to go in different directions to try and figure it out. And in the fourth book, oddly enough, it's the opposite. It becomes very personal. There's this one malevolent little sprite who has it in for our hero and is just melting him mentally. Total torture. And he's got to figure out how to deal with that. So always the problems presented by the villains have to be huge. And there are puzzles. As you get in games, you get puzzles. In the third book, chapter 9, everything's told that you get the answer in about 16 lines of verse, 3 or 4 syllables each. And well, there's your answer. But what does it mean, any of it? I can see what it says, but it makes no sense. So they've got to figure out the answer they've already been given. And you've got it in front of you as a reader. And you go, well, okay, let's watch them try and figure this out. So yeah, always big challenges, big puzzles, big problems, big obstacles. And that's the pleasure of adventuring, certainly in games as well as in books.
Absolutely. Now, you said because they get sucked into this game world, is the game overlay still there? Is there they're leveling up? Is it progression fantasy or true game lit RPG?
No, it's not true. It's lit RPG adjacent, but there is the whole leveling up idea in that they get better and they get more qualified to go on and do other things. But it's all explained at the end of book 1, what's happened and why. And that doesn't mean it's the end of it. But they go, oh, okay, I see. And you mean there's more? And yep, there is more to come. There's more to be done. And it's going to probably get more challenging. So I was, looking at other books that don't leave the way open for sequels. I took a lesson from that and thought, we've got to figure out that this is going to lead on to something else because I'm enjoying writing these and want to keep turning them out.
That is a good problem to have.
I've been very lucky to have this idea. I have to tell you, I'm blessed.
So if you could, would you live in this world?
Oh, God, yes. In a heartbeat. Absolutely. Wouldn't you? In a world full of magic and mystery and mayhem. And to be young again. And to be young again. And to be competent and have a magic staff. And all that sort of stuff. Because there are great ale houses in this world. There's lands to discover and things to do. And one of the reasons that gaming is popular among people of all ages is that you can do it from the comfort of your own home, which is why we fall in love with these worlds. But to actually do it for real, woo, yeah, if only.
Okay. Now, in a lot of fantasy worlds, the roles of the gods are sort of ever present, and especially in gaming, it comes up a lot. Is that something you dealt with in this world, or did you kind of leave that behind?
Yep. In the second book, the cosmology becomes an important part of it. There's no hint of it in the first book, but there's a whole different zodiac, as it were, calendar, and it's basically they're caught in the eternal war between gods and demons in another world, and there's nowhere they go is safe for them because they're being hunted by the good guys working very reluctantly for the bad guys, and it's tough. So they got to figure a way out of that, which is not at first immediately obvious what they should do, apart from possibly get burnt at the stake right at the beginning. So
that would sink.
Yes, it would be. It would be. Then there would be 3 left instead of 4. So there's scrapes aplenty, and the cosmology. And look, the whole idea of religions and morality and good versus evil, they've all been tied up in human history for hundreds and thousands of years. And all religions keep saying you can only be moral if you believe in our religion. You can only be ethical. Well, it's not true, because ethics and religions and morals are 3 separate categories. Morals are morals, religions are religions, beliefs are beliefs, ethics are ethics. You can perfectly well be ethical and moral and be an atheist, and you can be religious and a scoundrel.
Okay. It feels like we're winding down because I can't ask you any more questions that would give spoilers, because we don't do that here. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you think we need to go over that listeners and readers need to know?
No, I'm been pleasantly surprised and happy that lots of people have written reviews in which they stress the fun element of it, that there are laughs among the adventures, and I think that's important. There's this new category called cozy fantasy. I went to a class at one of the conventions. It was the British Science Fantasy Convention, and the head of that society gave a lecture on cozy fantasy, and he explained the whole thing, and I thought, yeah, that's exactly where my books fit. That's why he had me in there. Fantasy that gives people a good time, just like gaming gives you a good time, and that's it. Just come on in. The water's fine.
Now, is cozy different than slice of life when it comes to genre?
I think so. I wouldn't be the expert on that. You'd have to talk to David Green, the head of the British Fantasy Society, who talked about that. But this is his passion. That he's an expert on Tolkien as well, who would fit that category. It's just, I think it's not. It's what's the other categories? Grimdark is one that would be a different category. So yeah.
All right, so this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, so do your part. It really is important. If listeners or readers wanted to check you out, obviously links are in the show notes, but where is the best place to find you?
RichardSparks.com. There's no E in Spark. Well, you can see that. www.richardsparks.com. If you go there, you can get free samples of each book to read as a PDF file, download, or else a free audio sample of me reading a chapter from each book, both of which have some comic elements in them. So there's an easy, simple way to get to have a taster and see if it appeals. If it does.
Now, did you narrate the audiobook or just do the sample?
Yes, I did. And I did it because one of my test readers, who's a producer here in Los Angeles, I said, well, who should we get to read this? Because there are a lot of good English actors here. And he said, oh, when I read it, I hear your voice. You should do it. And I went, okay. And anyway, I got Fred Sanders produced it, who did the Game of Thrones books. Or at least he did the last couple. He did Dance with Dragons. So he was very encouraging. I've known Fred my wife was at high school with him. So he was really good at producing and directing. Just to go for it. Authors know how their characters sound and how the rhythms go of the prose. And okay, some of my accents are better than others. I'm good. My Australian accent's fine. My British rustics are fine. My my Asian American sword dancing girl is not quite so good, but just sort of indicate it and go for it and have a good time. That was a lot of fun, and I'll be doing the third book soon. So yeah, just go to richardsparks.com, get a sample. Please come on in.
All right, and I will link to all of that in the show notes, dear listener, including the New Rock series where you can buy the books, because it helps when you pay the money and read the books. That really does matter. You can find us, a dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree / Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree / Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Facebook group, and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Save that one for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, people. Or you could, speaking of getting that coffee brand coffee, if you want to support us that way, use the code PODCASTGRUNTS. Link is in the show notes. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. And the coffee really is good. And with that, I will thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for coming on, Richard. This was a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to check these books out.
Thank you for having me. And if you want me to send you the audiobooks, just get in touch via Luan, and I will get you some files you can download. It's codes. You download them off something called Downpour, and with the code, you get a free sample.
All right. I'm going to definitely check that out. With that, I would thank you, dear listener. And we're going to hit the end button. Wait for it.